Yeah, I'm recording it, guys. So if you do want to pass it on to any of your friends, relatives, people that you want to spend your retirement with, since once you'll have a couple of these houses, you'll have, get 4 of these things, and you've got $1 million a year coming in, and you'll understand that you'll be able to buy a new one every year. So it won't take too long that you'll need some friends to go and spend some money on, or travel around the world and do whatever you want to do, because school fees will be paid for, house will be paid off, retirement will be all organised. So then your biggest question is, how am I going to be spending all this money? So there's no point going and spending $3 million on a block of land in Sydney, Melbourne metropolitan area. There are no blocks of land. That's the first thing. So you've got to buy some rundown old house, knock it all down. You can get maybe half an hour out of the city for $1.5 million or so for something that's going to be big enough to build an NDIS house on. But and there's demand from NDIS participants everywhere. But there's just no point if you're looking at it from an investment point of view. We want the lowest land cost. We want the highest demand. We're manufacturing our own capital growth, so therefore close to the CBD, close to train stations, close to Coles, close to anything else is completely irrelevant, except if it's close to a hospital, of course, which is typically where we're buying these things, as close to hospitals as we possibly can, and medical centres and medical services. So I think that vaguely answers that question. But what you find is there's probably more demand in regional areas than what there is in the city anyway, because when we're looking at who's going to be providing services, you've got people like Brotherhood of St. Lawrence, Anglicare, all those guys. When an apartment block goes up in, I just got to let somebody know to check their emails so they can join in. Or actually, Lawrence, can you please email Devang or text him the link for the meeting, please? So when you look at what the demand is, there's a report that came out at the end of last year, which is going to upset lots of people. And it tells you that, and we all know that Mildura's got one of the highest demand for NDIS in the country. So I've been telling my clients that for 4 years, since I started driving up and down there, and, Lawrence and I driving up and down there, him having to put up with me for 8 hours in a car.
So, excuse me, Joe, who did you want me to email?
Devang.
Okay, yeah. Righto.
So Devang's in our Indian office, and that office is in, I don't know how to say it, Ahmedabad, which is where one of the World Cup cricket matches was played. Maybe you should mute yourself, Lawrence, so I don't echo. Maybe. Or maybe I'll mute you. So there's a lot of interest coming from overseas, Vietnam, India, Singapore, Malaysia, to Indonesia as well, to put your money into Australia, where it's effectively the safest place in the world to be investing. And then, of course, if you've got the government that's paying the rent for 40 years, or as long as this participant's alive in that house, there is no better investment in the world. And so I can go around and explain why there is no better investment in the world, and hence, why it's not too good to be true. But as I was saying about Mildura, so we know that's a regional area. It's a food bowl area. The land is effectively cheap. They've got giant hospital system, which is what we want, the Mildura-based hospital. And the reason why there's such a high demand is because all the pesticides that are used on your food that you're eating caused all sorts of birth defects, sicknesses, etc. So that report was released towards the end of last year, and it just made perfect sense. And then we all understood, that's why Mildura has some of the highest demand in the country. So, if you could choose between spending $3 million on a block of land in Sydney and $200,000 in Mildura, there's actually more demand in Mildura because you've got less competition from a provider point of view. And that's what I was starting to say about people like Brotherhood of St. Lawrence, Salvation Army, who are Anglicare, those sort of companies. They'll go and buy 10% of the apartments in a new apartment building, and they will manage those and look after people with a disability in those apartments. But they're not going to go to Renmark in South Australia. They're not going to go to Shepparton. They're not in Mildura or any of those places. And that leaves the opportunity for you guys to be investing in those areas and getting the same amount of rent as what you would in Sydney, but with astronomically lower cost to entry. So your returns are enormously higher. So everything that we're talking to you about in house and land packages is typically 20 to 30% gross returns, which is huge because that's where the demand is. The buildings all cost about the same to build, roughly. I need to tell you all to hurry up and to invest because NDIS wants us to build bigger houses because we're not building enough to house and keep up with the demand that there is for people wanting accommodation. So if we can build a house for 3 participants, it takes the same period of time to build that as what it does to build a house with 2 participants, then the NDIS is happy and the providers want us to start building those from the 1st of July. All our major NDIS providers that we're in bed with want that to happen. And what that means is bigger blocks of land, and it also means a bigger house. So therefore, there's a cost of money for a bigger block of land, and there's also cost to build a bigger house. So very easy to get 2 participants in any of our houses. A little bit harder to get 3 because of personality clashes and storing all their equipment, etc. And yeah, so chop, get yourself organised so you can have, one of the 2 participant houses there rather than having to spend, more money on a 3 participant house in the very near future. So the costs are going up and up and up. When Lawrence and I started running around and telling people about this nearly 5 years ago, we were selling high physical support houses for $600,000. Those houses value at over $1 million today. So that's $100,000 worth of capital growth per year, $2,000 a week just in capital growth. On top of that, you've got cash flow. And the cash flow for all our customers have got 2 participants in there. It's a bit over $100,000, which is pretty good. I've got to say that we did expect to have 3 participants in those houses and therefore $150,000 a year. But the NDIS providers don't care about you. They don't care about me. They care about the person with the disability and what is in their best interests and best for their mental health. So that's a lesson that we've learned over time. What looks good on paper doesn't always work that way. And therefore that may partially answer the too good to be true story. But in a lot of cases, having 2 participants in a house, our investors are actually getting more money than what they're expecting to get with 3 participants. Because in recent houses that have been built, if 3 participant houses, if they're enrolled for just a 2 participant house, which then leaves 2 living areas, 2 lounge areas, we can be getting $80,000 or $90,000 per participant. And so we're getting $160,000, $180,000 for 2, whereas we were only expecting to be getting $150,000 for 3. So that's worked out really well for people as well. This presentation that I can run through for the new people, I haven't changed it since pretty much day one. I've just changed my contact details and things like that a little way through, but I've left it that way because everything that we talk to you about has worked out better than what we've promised. We typically under-promise like most people would, rather than over-promise and then have you quite disappointed. We'd much rather prefer to under-promise and have things work out. So usually what I do at the start of our weekly meetings is give you a bit of an update as to what's happened during the week, and then you would ask any questions based on that, and then I can run through the presentation for those people that haven't seen it before or want to see it again as well. So I'll ask again, from anybody, are there any burning questions, outstanding questions that you'd like me to address first? Okay. Attend, you've got yourself an NDIS house already, haven't you?
Sorry, not me.
No? Oh, okay.
I've been inquiring, but since you've asked one question here, I understand it's very difficult for the banks to lend you that money. Is that correct?
It's impossible for the banks to lend you the money. You are correct.
So that means you have to use your own savings, correct?
No. It means you have to use the one lender that is going to give you construction finance for NDIS. And once it's constructed and there's an income coming in, then typically what our customers would do is refinance that property with any lender or multiple lenders and buy another one. So yeah, you are correct. You can't just go to the Commonwealth Bank and say, I want to build an NDIS property. If it's already constructed, different story, but there's virtually nobody that's selling a constructed NDIS property because they can just refinance, get all their money back and buy another one as well. The only people that, on a slight tangent, the only people that have sold completed NDIS properties, and you would have seen some get emailed to everybody in the last couple of weeks, are the NDIS providers. So the good thing about the NDIS is that they tell us what they want in advance. They give us a heads up. And one of the things they said is that they don't want NDIS providers owning the houses. But the NDIS providers wanted to own the houses. They wanted to own all the accommodation because then the participant is locked in with them. And the NDIS said that, well, that's conflict of interest, because if you're looking after the participant and making money and there's no other accommodation, then you can be providing really, really shitty service and that poor old participant can't go anywhere else because there's no other accommodation. So it was frowned upon to do both. But then I think it was the 8th of December, the government said it's illegal for an NDIS provider to actually own the accommodation because it is a conflict of interest. So the NDIS providers that were desperate for accommodation, that have been buying accommodation, they've been buying blocks of land when the land comes up so it wouldn't be sold off to first home buyers or other investors or anybody else because the NDIS provider needed the accommodation, they actually have to sell those. And that's one of the advantages in dealing with us, is that those NDIS providers know that we have got thousands of investors, and so they tell us what they need sold and where it is. And if it stacks up okay and people are going to make money, then we'll get investors for them and they'll be able to get out of that property, conform to all the current rules and regulations, and concentrate on what they're meant to be concentrating on, which is looking after the participants. Everything that we talk to you about, we email you, you can purchase it in your self-managed super fund, and it would be an exceptionally good idea to be buying it in self-managed super fund as well. The difficulty with it is that you buy land, and then you go off and get a building contract. So that's 2 contracts. But in self-managed super fund, we're only allowed to have 1 contract. So what that means is we've got to use a third-party finance company to buy the land, sign up the contract with the builder on your super fund's behalf, pay all the interest repayments on the land, pay all the stage payments on the build, and then when it's complete, sell it to your super fund. So we have financier that'll do that for you. By the time, and they only charge $10,000 to do all that. All right, so it's actually a bargain to get it into your super fund. All the other costs that you are going to incur are going to be passed on to your super fund. So obviously it's going to cost you more to put it into a super fund, and it's going to end up costing you about $60,000 more than what it would by just buying it as a 2-part contract. So all those costs of making the repayments on the land, the interest repayments on the land, the interest on the build. Obviously, we had to pay stamp duty on the land as well.
It's cheaper, isn't it?
Sorry?
Sorry, isn't stamp duty cheaper then?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, because you're only paying stamp duty on the land, and the financier then finances everything. However, that financier actually owns that property while it's getting constructed. So then he's got to sell it. He's got to sell it to your self-managed super fund. So he's not going to pay for the stamp duty. So your super fund's actually got to pay another lot of stamp duty once the house is completed.
So double dipping.
Yeah. So there's double dipping by the government when we're trying to get one of these things into our self-managed super fund. So if we were to build a normal house and land package of around this value, $850,000 to $950,000, while it's being built, you've probably paid out $50,000 or $60,000 to get that through to completion, roughly. Now, if we then have it in the super fund, we're probably paying on top of that another $50,000 or $60,000 to get it into the super fund with the associated fees, charges, etc. So any of the prices that you see come out through our emails, if you added about $100,000 to that, that would tell you how much it's going to roughly cost you to get it into your super fund. Now, people have said to me 100 times, well, I don't want to pay an extra $100,000 to get something into my super fund, but they actually should, because in the super fund, the tax rate, right? So the tax rate is only 15% on the income. You've got tax deductions because you've got the cost of interest. You've got huge depreciation in any of these NDIS houses because of all the fixtures and fittings, additional fixtures and fittings that are in there. And you've also got, so it's the tax rate. And if you're over 60, then there's no tax if you're not working full time. Alrighty. So yes, we've been shafted by our wonderful government again and the banks. So if there's anybody surprised about that, bad luck, you shouldn't be. But once it's in the super fund, it's only going to take you 2 or 3 years to actually have recouped that money by the fact that you're paying less tax. And after that, you're making a screaming profit from the less amount of tax that's being shafted on the income that these things are generating. The other point is in your super fund, you can't refinance either. Now, just remember, I'm not an accountant. I'm not, you know, a lawyer. I'm not a conveyancer. I'm not a mortgage broker. I'm not a real estate agent, which means that I can tell you what other smart people are doing without, you know, any limitation. And what one of our customers does is buys every NDIS property that he can get. He's a real estate agent. When it completes, in his super fund, he was a real estate agent. He's an elderly gentleman that's retired. He sells those properties for no capital gains tax, but let's say he's paid $950,000 for it. It's getting $200,000 a year. So on a commercial, and this also is a bit of an answer to the finance question as well. You know, it's impossible to get finance. Yes, because it's a commercial loan.
Commercial.
Yeah, it's not a residential loan. It's a commercial loan. It's sort of half and half because it's a residential house in a residential neighborhood, but it's got a commercial lease. So that's what confuses the hell out of the banks. And for a while they did it, and then they stopped doing it.
So it's similar to buying a display home then. So it's considered a commercial.
Vaguely, yeah. And it's all based on the income.
Yeah, so because the lease is so high, it's higher than your normal lease agreements.
The main difference about the lease is that the lease is a minimum of 5 years. So there's no residential leases that are 5 years plus options. So that pumps it over into the commercial lease side of things, which is really good for us because then it's just purely based on the income. So if you've got an income of $200,000 a year, based on a 7% cap rate for metropolitan areas, 8% for regional areas that we can get, and 10% cap rate because I didn't too well in primary school maths, you know, that property's worth $2 million to $2.5 million. So that investor is selling. He bought it for $950. He's selling it for he's actually selling it for about 1.6 to 1.8. All right. The bank valuation is $2 million. So the funds that are buying it, he's basically selling them to superannuation funds. They're buying it because they're getting better than a 10% return, and they think it's great. He's effectively he's more than doubled his money because he hasn't had to put in $950,000. He's only had to put in whatever deposit was required to get that property built. And yeah, not pay tax on it. So there are some huge advantages to having these things in your super fund, because if you could build a property 1 year, sell it the next, double your money, and then, you know, buy 2 the following year, you probably wouldn't need to go to work either. That's the theory. We've told you about theories and how very often they work out better than you know, what we initially planned, but that's somebody that's already doing it as well. So I think that's a very long answer to a very simple question, and you would be nuts if you had money in super not to be buying one of these things and getting it into super, you know, sort of as quickly as you can. To get it into super with that third-party finance company, we effectively need 35 to 40% of the value of the property. So if we've got a $900,000 property, we're adding $100,000 for costs and the initial stamp duty. We're also going to need additional stamp duty to pay once it's completed, which is probably $40,000 or $50,000 as well. So the 35% deposit is we're going to need about $350,000 to $400,000 to purchase $950,000 worth of NDIS property these days. Not everybody has that amount of money in their super. However, would be worthwhile considering joining with one of your friends, relatives, or up to 5 of your friends and relatives to get that amount of money into your super fund, because, you know, once you've got that deposit together, because you realise you can have multiple people in a super fund. You know, if you're sitting with, you Australian super you're with 1 million other people. If you're in a self-managed super fund these days, I believe you can have up to 6 people in that super fund. So one person can put in $1,000, another person can put in 100. Get yourself to the required deposit, and you've got yourself an NDIS house. So when you look at the returns that is creating, and what the comparison to the share market would be, you're making an astronomical return. Spend $350,000 to get into an NDIS house. You're getting $200,000 a year in income. So that's over a 50% return on your money. You've just doubled the capital value of your investment from $950 to $2 million. So you've made $1 million. Add that to the $300,000 that you just doubled. You've spent $350,000 to make $1.3 million in a year. Once again, best investment in the world. Happy to argue with anybody about that. So, COVID.
So if we got 250,000 in SNSF, which is we transferred last year around April, May, and we still don't know what to do with our money. It's still sitting in there doing nothing. I'm just confused with a lot of things, where to go, where not to go. Just being more cautious. I don't want to do a bad investment either.
Yeah.
And we went and saw one of the real estate, income tax thing.
You're right.
And
Financial planning.
yeah. And she advised basically there's a lot of cost involved in buying commercial property or the house with that. There's a lot of hoops and things to jump around. Basically,
Yeah.
that's what
It's
kind
not
of
straightforward.
Yeah.
So it's not your basic investment. So yeah.
Yeah. They're 100% correct, and all they're doing is persuading you not to go and set up a self-managed super fund, all right, because they're going to lose money. Okay. So even if the costs were twice as much as what they are, it's actually still worth doing. So yeah, you've got to set up a super fund. That can cost you anywhere from $3,500 up to $12,000, depending on if you need advice and how old you are. There's the cost of having it audited every year, which is around $2,000 to $3,000 a year as well. And when you compare those costs to having the money sitting in a normal everyday super fund, it's actually cheaper, because overall the fees of the industry funds, I think they add up to nearly 1%. So the fees are about the same. Obviously there's setup costs which are more. But then when you look at the returns, I've already given you the returns from leveraging into one of these properties. But even if you didn't worry about what the capital growth was, you're making a couple $100,000 a year in income. So
higher return.
Yeah, so compare that to what the share market's done. So the share market's pretty much at its highest ever. However, it's still about the same as what it was 10 years ago, but there's no leverage. So if we put $200,000 into the share market, and it's having a really good year, and it has the best year ever, and it gets a 20% return, the best that we could ever hope for in 120 years of history was a 20% return, which is $40,000. Now, it's impossible for any of our NDIS properties to not generate more than that. So in the worst year that an NDIS property could ever have, it's still going to give you a greater return than what the best year of a share market return could possibly get anybody. So, and of course it's, bricks and mortar, and, it's a house that people can live in. So, even if, we have a pill that cures every single disease, you still know that the average property in Australia is going to double every 7 to 10 years anyway. So, that's our worst case scenario with the property. We've got $1 million worth of property doubling every 10 years. We're making $100,000 a year, worst case scenario on capital growth. So whichever way we slice it, just thanks to the leverage, thanks to getting a loan, we can get a spectacularly safer return by using super to be investing.
Sorry,
But-
Joe, just to confirm, sorry, because we also were advised, like before we do it, so you can't use all the super apparently, you can only use a percentage of the self-managed. So is that correct in saying that?
Yeah. So just remember, I'm not your accountant, but
Yeah.
what the bank wants to see is usually they sort of think of it like if that house is vacant for a year and you lose your job, and COVID-25 comes along, how are you going to make the repayments to them? So people think, oh, it's my money, it's my money, it's my money, and they get a bit nervous about spending their money, but it's actually the bank's money. And the bank are the world's, second biggest tight asses and, pessimistic people. And they're a lot more pessimistic than you and I are ever going to be. And it's their money that they're using to buy this property. So they want to know how you're going to make those repayments for a year. And so typically we have to leave about a year's worth of repayments in your super fund to get that all through.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and that's and your fees and auditing and that.
Well, it's similar to investing in other properties, like that's why they only allow you the 20% to make sure you have enough funds to cover.
Yeah, yep, correct. So they're just covering their own bank size. They don't care about you, as well. And what I was going to say with Raghu as well is that I don't know if you saw, but we had some apartments in Sydney that were sold, or that came from one of the NDIS providers. So that NDIS provider bought 19 apartments, St. Mary's in Queensland. The properties came to settle, so they're completed, and he realised that he wasn't legally allowed to settle them now because, they'd bought them 2 years ago, 3 years ago before the building started. They bought them off the plan. So he had to sell them, and they were $700,000 to $760,000. So if you had $180,000 in your super fund, you could have bought one of those properties.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they all sold in about 13 minutes, I reckon, from when we did our email out, because they had to get rid of them in a hurry. So we just did an email blast to all our customers, and they all disappeared. So obviously I've got all your details, which is how you get here, because we just do an invitation every week to this NDIS presentation. So you will see, you'll be the second people to see what there is for sale, and it disappears, effectively straight away. How you get to be the first person to see what's coming up for sale is have an expression of interest organised, have a talk to your accountant, our accountant, or both for a second opinion to work out what the ownership structure should be for this investment, and get finance organised, because your salesperson will know, or I will know, what you're waiting for, what you're interested in, what you hate, where your land tax problems are, so you can't invest, in Dan Andrews' country anymore, whatever it might be. And when those become available, we just ring you and give you the details and say, all right, this is coming up. We know you're waiting for X, Y, Z. Have a look at it, see if this is something that you want, yes or no. And then you're given that option before we just drop it out to the whole database and it just disappears.
Perfect.
So having said that, the NDIS provider that I'm talking about, which is Value Care, which is one of the biggest providers in Australia, have hundreds of properties that they've purchased that they are now not allowed to own. So, stiff shit for them. Very good luck for you. Okay? So if you think how much money they would have made on those properties, they are not the happiest people in the world, but they don't really care too much. because they're operating in the best interest of the participants. And I've had a meeting with them on Thursday, and they're giving us those they're all in various stages of construction or approval, and they're giving those properties to us. And I'll give you an example of how important that is. From December until the middle of December, when we were waiting for the Royal Commission into Aged Care and Disability Services to be digested and released to us, we had 6 houses to sell over that period of time. All right, from middle of December to February. Okay, I mean, there's plenty of other houses that we could sell, but they don't have leases. They don't have participants. They're never going to have participants at all. So, all the properties that we talk to you about have a lease. They have NDIS providers. They're with the biggest and best NDIS providers in the country. There's a commitment from them when they give us that lease to then go and hire approximately 10 staff to make that house operate as it should, whereas we can't get that from anywhere else. So we couldn't recommend any other houses. So we've been starving for the last couple of months, but now we're off and running again with these new releases that we'll be getting. And the point of that is that there are some more of those apartments in those properties. So when I know how much super people have got, and therefore how much deposit is going to be required and what budget that relates to, that can be allocated to you for to have a look at, see if you want to go ahead with that particular property as well. So very important, talk to your salespeople, get an expression of interest, get the ownership structure organised, get finance organised, because, I keep saying it, the NDIS provider doesn't care about the greedy investor, all right? He's trying to find a house for somebody to move into, to stop them getting beaten up in a group home with 20 other people, stop them getting yelled at by their mum, their brother, their, stepdad, all these other horror stories that you hear about NDIS. It's a horror story that wonderful people like me trying to get into heaven and new investors are solving by providing more accommodation for these people. So any of the nightmares, it's virtually 99% of cases due to a lack of accommodation and lack of carers. And if we don't have those carers, there's no point building a house. Every house that goes up, there's probably 10 jobs, not just carers, that's required to make that house operate. So, if we've sold 19 apartments, that's 200 new jobs that we've created. Where are you going to get 200 new staff? How are you going to administer 200 new staff? We need to be dealing with a significant NDIS provider to make all that happen. So don't think the builder's the most important piece of this puzzle. Anybody can build a house because they've got the instructions. All the instructions are detailed down to the last millimetre as to how big something needs to be, how wide it needs to be, how strong it needs to be, all that sort of thing. So that's not the issue. Obviously, the banks are an issue, okay, but we've got the finance company there. We need an NDIS provider who's going to look after the participant. He's going to have carers to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and wipe somebody else's backside. We've got to have appropriate flat land. We've got to be in an area where not every other idiot or, marketing company, greedy marketing company has gone and built houses. For example, in one suburb, there's 17 robust houses built in the one street. Now, robust people can be the crazy ones. They might just have depression, but they might be the crazy ones. So can you imagine putting 17, crazy people side by side in one street with mental issues? I can guarantee you don't want to be the other house, in that street, in that neighbourhood, and, you won't let your kids go out the front to play. And it's actually illegal anyway because it's over the density limits. So however they did that, we don't know, but we certainly know that our NDIS providers and SDA providers are aware of it and have told us that we're not getting approved to sell in that area anymore. either. So there's
Sorry, Joe, just one more question, maybe
Yeah.
more. So what's the general term that they would lease it out for? Like, did you think you mentioned 5 years? Is that
No.
and what? No?
All right, so first question answered. All the NDIS providers that we deal with are giving us at least 20 years of lease. And they break it down into different, and that corresponds to the finance that they get from the government. So if you sign up to something today, or your house is enrolled today as a completed house under the NDIS scheme, the government's going to pay you rent for 20 years at that rate plus inflation every year. So so the NDIS provider will always give us 20 years worth of lease, and they're all a little bit different, but the vast majority of them will give us a 10-year lease and 2 5-year options. Okay. One of the providers gives us 40 years lease, and we find that the leases are actually getting longer because some genius worked out that the NDIS is illegal from a point of view because it used to discriminate against people that are over 65. So, which is correct, because the NDIS until last year only looked after people up to age 65, and then they had to move into aged care. So the government got taken to court, and whoever took them to court won, because it's pretty simple. Yeah, it's pretty simple, very simple. And so that means that the providers are now one of them's doubled the lease. He's giving us a 40-year lease, which is it's 10 years and all 5-year options.
That's good.
Yeah, so it's fantastic for the investor. It's twice as much as what we ever expected. I used to have people arguing about, oh, what am I going to do in 20 years, with a house that nobody wants to live in or can live in. It's just a complete irrelevancy these days. So as long as somebody is in that house before they turn 65, the government will not drag them out of the house and leave them in the gutter or throw them into some aged care facility. It will leave them in the NDIS house, and it will pay you the NDIS rent for as long as they exist, and they live there, or they get taken back to hospital, or they do.
It depends if the government don't change their policies on it.
Yeah, correct. So the the Royal Commission into Aged Care and NDIS was one of those opportunities for the government to change its rules and regulations. There were a whole lot of recommendations that they made, and one of those recommendations were that they need bigger houses built. So that's the heads up that I was talking about before, because for the last couple of years they were saying they don't want the NDIS provider to also own the houses. So now that became legal. It's actually pretty impressive how the NDIS work and how they work with people. I know there's a lot of bureaucracy, and it takes a year to get, might take a year to get somebody's finance and for accommodation to be approved. But it's pretty impressive how they work with all the stakeholders and make sure everybody's getting their say and laying out a path, because it's a long-term commitment to us as the investors, the providers, the participants, their families. It's very, very impressive to be dealing with them, and everything is documented. It's all in black and white, so there's no confusion. There's no argument. There's no grey area at all. It's all very, very straightforward with it. So we do like it, and we know what's coming up. So that was one of the opportunities for them to change the rules. They only improved things from our point of view. And also there was a 5-year review that was finished in June of 2023, where, we were terrified that, they were spending $23 billion a year, $24 billion a year last year in NDIS. And we thought, oh, shit, that's more than Medicare. They're going to cut it now. They actually took the rent from $23,000 a room for improved livability up to $70-something thousand per room for improved livability. And they took high physical support from 43, 46, somewhere in there, up to 84, 86, something like that. So they actually doubled the rent or tripled the rent, which caught a lot of people by surprise, because we thought, if they're trying to cut costs, well, that's an obvious way to do it. But they realised that for every dollar that they spend on NDIS, they actually put 2.2 into the economy. So they're making a profit for every dollar they spend on NDIS. A lot of it's to do with those jobs that I mentioned before, of course.
Yeah.
But also it's the savings from not having to look after people in hospital, aged care facilities that the government pays for, etc. as well. So, they're only paying you. Yep.
Oh, what I like about your providers, you're not some tin pot investment company saying, "Oh, this is a good suburb to build an NDIS house in." You're building houses where the providers are suggesting to build, and then those providers, are planning and have someone ready to put in there. And so that's why you're so sure that it's almost to not get a participant. I'm right on that, aren't I, Joe?
Yeah, but that took us 4 years to organise, remember, as well. All righty?
So like say if you're in if that area you're in gets big 17 houses in the street by these other tin pot investors, maybe not with that provider, and then it's all flooded. Well, one, we should still be safe because we're with the good provider and they have their people. Right?
Yeah, so that's what
But
I was
if
alluding.
Yeah,
I was I'll just answer. I was just alluding to that before, that I needed to get you guys to hurry up, because the first people that own the houses in the area get the participants, and then those participants don't move. Okay? So
even robust?
Yeah, they don't move. Okay, because they need all the technology, they need custom design things, they need extra staff, they've got their routine. A lot of these people can't deal with a break-in routine at all. That you can't move them around anywhere. And that's why the providers give us up to a 40-year lease, because they know that person's going to be sitting there for effectively the rest of their life. And that's why we sort of try and hurry you up to do this as soon as you can, because, once there's half a dozen houses or a dozen houses in an area, you shouldn't really be putting any more in that area at all. And so it is very limited from our point of view as to what we can do, depending on the area, of course. And what I was saying, I think I've had a whinge in previous meetings about, I'm picking up NDIS providers at 7:30 in the morning on a Sunday, okay, which I didn't even know that time existed on a Sunday, all right? But I'm picking them up, I'm taking them to breakfast, I'm filling myself full of coffee, and that's just to build the relationships with those guys so that they'll give us that stock for my customers first. And then again, Kristen and myself, we're out with NDIS providers, SDA providers, and one of the fund managers till 3:00 last Thursday night, filling them full of alcohol and extracting all their trade secrets. So lucky.
I haven't asked you this one before, Joe. If you had say if the shit hit the fan and you get stuck without someone, do you know of any sort of thing that these houses can be used for instead of the general public, whether aged care or not just co-living, maybe something better, or they might knock IL on the head?
It's basically co-living, okay? So when these houses were being completed, when we started them before COVID and they were getting completed, the real estate agents in the area were asking our customers if they could use them for co-living. So co-living is basically aged people over 65, 67, whatever it is these days, that did not want to go into aged care facilities where everybody was dropping dead of COVID and getting 3 peas and half a carrot and, a slap for dinner. They wanted to be living with their friends in a house and being cared for. So co-living means that somebody comes around, takes them shopping, takes them to bowling, takes them to watch the footy, and they pay a portion of their pension to that typically, and maybe a bit more money as well. So the returns on co-living are about 10% return. The normal everyday investment property in that area is going to be giving these days 5 to 6% return, depending on where it is. You know, if it's in Sydney, it's probably 3% or 4%. You know, in a lot of Melbourne suburbs, it's, you know, maybe 5% as well. So normal house 5%, co-living 10%, if we're lucky 12%, NDIS apartments 15%, house and land packages up to 30%, depending on the NDIS provider. So yeah, so our worst
What
case
agents do that?
Sorry?
What sort of agents do the co-living? Is that what sort of mobs? It's not just
Yeah, it's not your
agent, is
local.
it?
No, it's not your local little real estate agent. It has to be a co-living company that's registered for aged care and that sort of stuff, typically, as far as I understand as well. So that's why they
Yeah.
can charge a bit more money, because they provide a whole lot of other services as well as the accommodation for them. Yeah, so-
okay.
So there's
Thanks for
no,
that.
sorry, so there's no guarantee that you would get an NDIS
There is
qualified person living.
there is a guarantee, because we've
There
got a
is?
lease. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So it's not really a question that we have to consider, because if there was any doubt of us getting a participant, we would not have got a lease from that provider.
Mhm.
So when that provider gives us a
Yeah.
lease, he's
Mm.
he's already paying a plan manager, his staff, to get that participant ready for that house.
Mm.
The builders that we use have to sign an agreement with the NDIS provider to have the house completed in under 12 months,
Mhm.
because if it goes over 12 months, the participant's finance approval has expired, and then they have to do that finance approval all over again, which can take another 12 months. So there's a whole lot of pressure and to get these things done within a certain time frame, while he's got the participants to move in as well. Yeah.
Sorry, dumb question. What's SDA? So what's the difference, NDIS and SDA?
Yeah, it's actually a good question, and I glossed over it all the time, because the NDIS provider is the one that looks after the participant, the person with the disability, but they don't rent the house. So who rents the house from you is the SDA provider. So the SDA is Specialist Disability Accommodation, and they give you the lease, right?
Okay.
What they do with it is basically up to them. So they can be dealing with one NDIS provider, they can be dealing with 3 NDIS providers, and we really don't care, because the NDIS providers are the ones that have the client, and those NDIS providers take that client to the SDA and said, can we please rent a room from you? And they work it all out, do the paperwork, get the lease organised, manage the property, manage that participant.
All right. So they're like the agents.
They're definitely the property agents, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So we think of them as little, real estate agents. They're the property manager. They're creating the lease with us.
Okay.
And then their tenant is it's effectively the it's not quite legally, but it's the NDIS provider.
NDIS. Okay. Yeah.
And so I use them interchangeably, because for the first 3 or 4 years, they used to be very often one and the same company. But now it's the same thing as conflict of interest. The government says, no, the NDIS provider who's looking after the people should not be, like I said before, the same company that's looking after the house. Because there's a terminology in NDIS which says freedom of choice or something like that. And freedom of choice says that that participant can move houses whenever they want. But if there's no other houses and they've got a lease tied up, then we've got to separate them. That's all. That's all. That's all.
Alright, so it's pretty much like a segregation of duties. They can't be accountable.
100%.
They can't be accountable for both.
Correct. Correct.
Mhm.
Correct. Yeah. Alrighty. So it's a fairly good set of questions, guys. Is there any other questions? And I see a couple of people have been on the call before. Did you new guys want me to run through the NDIS presentation?
Not at the moment. Maybe if you just email us, Joe, that'll be good. I can squeeze through some information.
Yeah. Can you just tell me what an email address is for you?
It's RS
RS
underscore
underscore
Chelevia CHEL
EL.
UV.
Hang on 2 seconds. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop this recording, and I can email it out to everybody as well. 1 sec.
I'll text you the email address anywhere. Like type it in.
All right. I'll.
It's better.
Yeah, but he's got it. He sent you the link.
Oh, okay. So you want it or not?
It's all right if you need to.
Hang on, guys. Sorry, got the sun on my screen and I can't quite see where it all is.
To everybody.
Yeah.
Joe. Joe.
Anyway, sorry.
Direct message, yeah.
Yeah, so sorry for RS underscore CHEL.
Should have sent it in the text. You should have received it in the message, Joe.
Okay, all right, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool.
All right, lovely. And you guys are together then, sitting there, are you?
Yeah.
Very good. All right, so that's pretty much all done for today. Obviously, you'll have my details when I send things through as well. And a lot of you have got a salesperson to deal with, so we will go from there. All right.
All right. Thanks,
And
Joe.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime. So every
Okay,
Monday.
thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I'd also say to all you guys, you're close to earning a couple $100,000 extra a year, which is going to give you a fantastic lifestyle. So just remember that there's no point, going to the beach, playing golf, if you got no mates that can afford to do the same. So invite some here. Seriously. Invite your friends along next time, and we'll bribe you and corrupt you for such referrals as well. All right.
No worries. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
too.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
See you. Bye. Bye.
Oops.
Bye-bye.
See you.